Hello again, it's Tony Wright, First Love Christian Church, or FLCC, and AB Wright Ministries. You know what this is, 90-day Bible study. We're on day 18. We're in Judges, 3rd chapter, 28th verse, through the 15th chapter and the 12th verse. Whoa, man. When we left from yesterday's reading, remember, we were on the roller coaster, watching Israel going back and forth, between turning against God and then turning around and crying out to him for mercy and rescue. Now, God would send somebody to rescue them from their predicament, and they would follow whoever the person was. Then when that person died, they were right back to their foolish disobedience and sinful ways. And as we came into today's reading now, Israel, once again, fallen into their evil ways after the death of Ehud, remember? And they had been sold into the hands of King Jabin of Hazor in the land of Canaan. And boy, once again, Israel suffers, this time for 20 years, as they're severely oppressed. And there was a prophetess and judge named Deborah who sat and heard the issues that were brought to her by the Israelites. Well, one day she called this dude Barak and told him that God had directed him to go with 10,000 men with him, and God would deliver the army of Jabin into his hand. Now, Barak told her that he would go if she went with him. I don't know what that was about. And Deborah agreed to go, but she told him that if he went with that choice, it was not going to bring him any glory. So she told him that Sisera, the captain of Jabin's army, was going to be sold into the hands of a woman. Well, off they went, Deborah and Barak, to Kadesh. Now, and Sisera, he gathered his chariots and soldiers in preparation for battle. This dude had more than 900 chariots ready for the fight. So Barak and his men and the army led by Sisera, they went to battle. But we know already that God is with Barak. So this battle is not looking good for Sisera and his men. But Sisera, great captain of hosts that he is, takes off and scoots over to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber, a friendly nation to King Jabin. And Mr. Big Brave here told her to stand in the door of the tent, and if anybody asks, is there anyone in there with her, she's to tell him no. So feel a knife and say, Brother Sisera, he falls asleep. And this sister Jael went in where he was sleeping with a hammer and a nail and repaired the tent, right? No. She drove a nail through Sisera's temple and killed him. Now Barak and his crew, after they had dusted off Sisera's army and saw that he had escaped, they went looking after him, looking for him. So when Jael saw Barak, she told him to come with her and she would show him the man he was looking for. So they go into the tent and he finds Sisera lying there with a nail through his temple. What? Boy, stuck through the heart with a sword or hammered through the temple with a nail. I guess Mr. Brave Man had some options. Not very good ones, though. Fast forward. So the same day, Jabin was overtaken by Israel, and Deborah and Barak, they sang this song of praise. Right? Now, the tribes of Israel were recited before the people, and Miss Nailing through the temple was prophesied to be blessed. And once again, Israel, they were going to have, rest, and this time for another 40 years. Boy, at the end of this 40 years, is anybody else feeling a little irritated with these dudes? I mean, seems like they could just be consistent. Nobody's asking them to just follow God all the time, right? But maybe, there's really just a bridge too far. But if they're so bent on doing evil, why don't they just keep doing evil? But no. Anyway, so at the end of 40 years, they go back to evil. And then there's another 7 years of oppression. And this time it was the Midianites and the children of Israel. You might have guessed it. They cried out to God. And God sent an angel to one of his servants, Gideon. And the angel told Gideon that God is with him. Now Gideon seemed to be just a little bit suspicious, and said to the angel, well, if the Lord is with us, then why haven't we seen any of those miracles? Like when he brought them out of Egypt. And instead, all we've been getting is oppression. And why is the Lord forsaking us? And why has he delivered us into the hands of all our enemies? I know why. Because they've been so doggone hard-headed. That's why. Are you kidding me? The only time they think about God is when they're getting hammered. Dude, you got to be kidding. But God told Gideon that he is with him and that God will use him to save Israel from the hands of the Midianites. So Gideon says, how am I going to save Israel? Can't you see my family is the weakest family in Manasseh? And I'm the least powerful in my whole family. So if if I have your favor, then you show me a sign and wait here while I get an offering. So the angel agreed that he would. So Gideon went in and he made an offering out of meat and had some bread and some broth, and he came out and presented it to the angel. The angel told him to place it on the rock, the meat and the bread, and then pour the broth over it, right? So he did. And after he did, the angel touched the meat and the bread with his staff, and flame consumed the offering. Now, when Gideon, saw that, he looked up and he saw the angel was gone. Anyway, Gideon built an altar there, and he called it Jehovah Shalom. And he destroyed the altar to Baal. Well, buddy, that was a problem. And he knew it was going to be. So he actually destroyed that altar to Baal at night so no one would know who did it. But they found out, and they wanted to kill Gideon. Now, his father Joash told him that Baal is a god, then Baal should be able to avenge for himself. Ain't that the truth? Anyway, well, it looks like Gideon still wants to do a little testing. So to make sure that God intends for him to save Israel, he told God that he was going to lay a wool fleece on the ground, and if dew fell only on the fleece and the ground was dry, that he would know that God would save Israel by his hand. So the next morning, Gideon goes out, and he was able to wring out a whole bowl of water from the fleece. But the surrounding ground was completely dry. So now Gideon wants to put the fleece back down. And this time, Gideon wants God to keep the fleece dry and have the dew wet the ground. So the next morning, God had fulfilled that. Wait a minute. How many tests does this dude need? What in the world? Come on, dude. Remember, the don't cross this line there that we used to do when we were kids. You draw the little line, and when they cross that line, you just keep backing up and drawing another line. Shaking my head. Boy, this guy right here. But Gideon, he was finally convinced. So he started to assemble his army. When God saw, this mass of people he had, he said, no, that's too many. So he told Gideon that to have anybody that was afraid to go to return home. So more than 20,000 left. So he was left then with about 10,000. God said, no, that's too many. So he told Gideon, take them down to the water and to separate them out. So those who drank from their hands and lapped like a dog, put those who, in one group, and those who got on their knees and knelt down and drank water, put those in another group. Well, it was about 300 men that drank from their hands. So God said he was going to deliver Israel from the Midianites with those 300 people. So Israel, they defeated the Midianites, and then the people selected Gideon to rule over them. So they had peace for about 40 years. Now, Gideon, boy, he had some sons. You hear me? This dude had 70 sons. And this says nothing about daughters, but 70 sons. And the Bible says that one of his sons, by one of his concubines, lived in Shechem. Boy, Shechem just keep popping up, don't it? Now, this guy was named Abimelech. Go figure. And just like clockwork, just as soon as Gideon died, Israel turned back to Baal. No, you don't say. So Abimelech killed all his brothers except for Jotham, the youngest, who had hidden himself. And he convinced the people to make him king. But after he had ruled for about 3 years, God turned the leaders of Shechem against him for killing the 70 brothers. Now, although, some plotted against Abimelech, he still succeeded in destroying Shechem. Then Abimelech turned to Thebes. And it was during the attack there that a woman dropped a large rock off the wall and it hit Abimelech in the head. So cracked his skull. So Abimelech had one of his soldiers to kill him with his sword so that no one would say that he died at the hands of a woman. Go figure. And then, did you see, these people, what they did after Abimelech died? They went through judge after judge. And then finally, again, they cried out to God. And God told them that they had forsaken him for other gods, so he wasn't going to deliver them again. He told them, go tell the other gods that you've been turning to. Cry out to them. Boy, that sounded like a tell it to the hand moment, didn't it? So Israel then, cried out, they tried to put their false gods behind them, and they, wanted to seek after God. Now, there was a man in the Israelites by the name of Jephthah, and he had made a vow to God that if God would deliver Ammon into their hands, that Jephthah would sacrifice the first person that came up on when he returned. So God delivered the children of Ammon into their hands, and well, upon his return to the city, boy, out comes his daughter. He was torn apart. But he had to keep his vow. So he gave her a couple months to travel around the country, but at the end of that time, he just had to keep that vow. So he had to take his daughter's life. But Jephthah, he judged Israel for about 6 years. When he died, though, there were another series of judges that ruled in Israel, one for 7, another for 10, another for 8. Then bam, Israel went right back to doing the crazy old evilness. Oh my goodness, these dudes just won't stop. So this time they ended up under Philistine rule for 40 years. Now it was during this time that the angel visited the wife of Manoah and told her that they would have a child, and that child would be a Nazarite from birth. Boy, remember the vow of the Nazarite? Well, this was a vow placed on them from birth. Anyway, this son happened to be Samson. And after birth, his son grew strong. And you're probably familiar with the story of Samson, how he killed a lion with his hand, and he posed a riddle to the Philistines that they weren't going to be able to answer, but he was betrayed by his Philistine wife, who gave them the answer. And you probably remember he killed 30 Philistines and burned all the crops of the Philistines by tying like 300 foxes together by the tail and lighting on fire. They burnt up the fields and the crop. So the Philistines, they killed his wife. And then he slew 1,000 Philistines with the jawbone of a donkey. Boy, Samson. He judged over Israel though for 20 years. And he's still rolling hard because he's a Nazarite and standing in his vow. Boy, we got to get out of here for a minute. But you keep reading and you keep rolling along here because you keep checking us out on your favorite social media platform. And you know the rest. Tell your friends. Tell your neighbors. FLCC, we're on the move, brothers and sisters. We're taking ministry back to the first love. See you again soon, though. Peace.